Good morning, and yes, all speakers. Okay. So now, we are going to the favorite subject of Ariel Cohen, and as he mentioned the previous session, and this is a nuclear security, non-proliferation, and nuclear disarmament. And it was titled as a 1 minute to midnight, time for action for nuclear dialogue. And first of all, I would like just to clarify that we have very distinguished speakers, and we have 2 Nobel laureates as speakers, and we have experts from who worldwide known and as experts number 1 in this particular area. What I would like just, because take in consideration the time frame, it is the longest session in our Astana Club during our meetings. But my thinking is, if I advise to our speakers, because I have in the list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 speakers, maybe just not exceed the limit of 12 minutes. This is the one message. The second message to our speakers is that if you combine your interventions and your speeches with 2 very important subjects, and because first of all, maybe if you pay attention to the situation what we have now in the non-proliferation and the nuclear disarmament, nuclear security, and what is some new symbols or new elements of phenomena of nuclear disarmament for this time being, maybe new elements of philosophy or something like this. And it is my understanding that, yes, of course, we maybe saw touching the importance as usual of the NPT treaty, as well as maybe new elements what we have in the future and now. And we are waiting of the, maybe so you'll pay attention to the first use concept maybe, and we are waiting for some messages from the Washington DC maybe early next year. And it is my understanding that we have maybe, and the second part of your speeches, I would like just to ask maybe to say about the Global Alliance of Leaders, because the main title of this, it is within the framework of the Global Alliance of Leaders for Nuclear Disarmament. And in my understanding that just what I'm asking for, I'm asking just for maybe some proposals, some ideas, what we have to do in the future within the framework of the Global Alliance of Leaders. And for me, it will be absolutely very important to gather and to collect such kind of proposals, such kind of initiatives, such kind of ideas, in order to go further. Because in my understanding that we, as you very well know, that this idea and this initiative was initiated by the first president and the leader of the nation, and it was put on the 5th meeting in 2019. And it will be very good just to see what was last time since we last met in 2019, maybe so you have some new ideas on this particular direction, new proposals, what we have to do in the future within the framework of the GAL. In November 2020, the Foundation jointly with the Institute of World Economic and Politics held International Conference on International Security and the Result of the Global Nuclear Dialogue. And during this particular event, it was announced that all members of the Consultative Council of Astana Club has expressed their endorsement for an open call to the world leaders to create the further support for the GAL. And in my understanding, and I would like now to share our deep appreciation to all members of the Consultative Committee of Astana Club for their contribution for preparing this document and open call, and to work very seriously on the language of this document. And in my understanding that it is now for this timing a very good document, very balanced, where maybe it will be absolutely unique document where we incorporated non-proliferation, nuclear disarmament, and nuclear security. And my feeling is that now, so I would like just to announce that we have already, for this time being, we worked very hardly, and for this time being, we have 75 representatives from 43 countries who supported and joined to the initiative of the Global Alliance of the Leaders. And it is my understanding that now, so we have approximately, according to my information, 40 of these new members of the GAL. They're connected connected to our meeting and by networking, and it is my understanding that we will be very clear just to send them a message to send us to Kazakhstan, to foundation of the first president, their proposals on and their ideas, what we have to do in the future with the GAL. In my understanding, what we are looking to do within the framework of the Global Alliance of the Leaders, because first of all, in the Foundation and the Institute for World Economics and Politics, we are looking to establish two special groups in order to start working in a day-to-day manner with this initiative. And the second one, we are trying maybe and trying to finalize our expectation of the launching Alliance periodical publication, which maybe will, because it's very important that on the international level, if the members of this alliance will publish their materials, articles, their proposals, in order it will be very well known in the world. And if you have some additional proposals to this, we are very open to do, to be in line with your proposals. And my thinking is that, if I may, we will start with Beatrice Fien. She has video message, and after that we'll go to another persons who are speaking live. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, my name is Beatrice Fien, and on behalf of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, I want to start by thanking the Astana Club Organizing Committee and Nursultan Nazarbayev Foundation for inviting me here today to take part in the 6th meeting of the club. I'm very sorry that I couldn't make it to Kazakhstan in person due to travel restrictions, but I'm very pleased to be able to speak to you here today. And I want to start because I want to congratulate Kazakhstan for 30 years since the independence of the country. Since that day, Kazakhstan has become a leader on nuclear disarmament. And that leadership is urgently needed right now. The risk of nuclear weapons use is increasing. The doomsday clock is closer to midnight than ever. United Nations, the International Committee of the Red Cross are all warning that the risk of nuclear weapons use is increasing. We see the tensions between nuclear armed states increasing, and emerging technologies make the security environment more unpredictable and unstable. We are heading for danger if we do not act. And I think it's important to recognize that we have no preparedness in the international community to deal with the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of any use of nuclear weapons. And I know, of course, that Kazakhstan knows well how devastating the long-term impact of nuclear testing continues to harm people. And this is why we were so pleased to see the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons enter into force in January this year, 2021. This was a great achievement and a historic landmark and a counterforce to the unraveling of treaties, the increase of nuclear arsenals and the modernization programs that we've seen from the nuclear armed states the last few years. And the TPNW is really the future, with the majority of states behind banning and eliminating nuclear weapons. And we urge all countries and all individuals that are concerned about nuclear weapons to fully support this treaty. We look forward with working with Kazakhstan, but of course everyone else, states and individuals, to really make progress on this very urgent humanitarian issue. And the next big moment for us is, of course, the first meeting of states parties in March 2022, because together we can solve this problem. Thank you.
Well, in my understanding, that it was rightly mentioned that Kazakhstan strongly backed and remains committed to the long-term goals of the world without nuclear weapons. and where all state shares in the peaceful uses of nuclear technologies. This is one of the keystone and the key element in our foreign policy. And what I would like to suggest now, maybe so it will be a good idea if we, within the framework of our alliance, will try maybe to provide one new direction of our activity, to establish our relationships with the many NGOs which has existed in the world on this particular subject, including the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons, as well as in others. Maybe it will be a good opportunity at a later stage to invite them for the special session of NGOs who are involved in this particular direction and on this subject to discuss many issues what we have now in our agenda. Now, it's a great honor for me and the privilege to present the floor to His Excellency Mohammed El-Baradei, Nobel Peace Prize winner and Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency. Mr. El-Baradei, if you remember 1993, when I myself and Minister Shkolnik, we met firstly you in Vienna International Center. During this period of time, you were director of the legal department. And it was a very exciting moment for us, for these two gentlemen, and for our country, when we proceeded from the observers area to the full members area of the International Atomic Energy Agency. And you showed to us a big portion of help and advice and the guidance how to do it in the appropriate and the right way. Thank you very much, as well as you provided any help to another country. At a later stage, as you remember, when you was Director General, and you remember Ambassador Tornston, and after that Ambassador Murakami, who were directors of Safeguard Agreement departments, and you did a lot and helped us to finalize our agreements on the Safeguard Agreement with the IAEA, Kazakhstan and IAEA, especially Protocol number 1, but 2 especially Protocol number 2. And Your Excellency, please, floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Obisatov, and I do remember, our long-standing relationship, both at the time when I was at the IAEA and afterwards. And I would like again to thank Astana Club for convening this, in my view, very timely and important meeting. We are meeting today in a gloomy and depressing environment. The little hope we had when we met last year that we might see some positive movement on the nuclear arms control agenda with the new US administration is clearly dissipating. The level of polarization and distrust that saturate relations between China, Russia, and the US, as well as among and within regions, is one we haven't witnessed for a long time. In the area of our immediate concern, nuclear security and nuclear disarmament, the prospects for progress look bleak. Aside from the extension of the New START Treaty, the reported initiation of a, quote, strategic dialogue between Russia and the US, and a Zoom meeting recently between Biden and Xi, nothing constructive seems to be taking place at any level. Instead, new threats are being leveled by the major weapon states against each other. We see that every day. New science fiction-like weapons and hypersonic missiles are being developed and tested, motivated in part by what I see to be the growing strategic uncertainty resulting from the formidable potential of AI and cyber capabilities. Even a nascent idea hinted at by President Biden before he got elected of a sole purpose use of nuclear weapons, which means or could be interpreted as a non-first use, was reportedly shut down by most of the US closest allies. There is no talk of additional ratification of CTBT or initiating negotiations of a new nuclear arms control agreement. The future of JCPOA, the Iran deal, is precariously hanging in the balance since the US unilateral and abrupt withdrawal and the flurry of on-again, off-again meetings between the US and DPRK came to a complete halt with no tangible effort in sight to resume them.
We have some problem in the connection. What's happening? If is it a big problem for connection or? Sorry? Okay. If we have some time, maybe so, not to waste the time, maybe so, take in consideration the situation, I would like maybe to present the floor to His Excellency Lassina Zerba. If I'm not mistaken, you mentioned some on one of your interventions during the last 2 days that the Kazakhstan is your second native country. And it's very good to hear it from you. And everybody knows that you are laureate of the Nazarbayev Peace Prize for Nuclear Free World and Global Security, which took place in 2019. Please, for this time being, floor is yours.
Thank you, Kerat. And once again, let me express my pleasure to join such a distinguished panelist, and then to be at the Astana Club, and to be in Kazakhstan to start with. I'm also honored to be part of this important issue, the topic, and also the follow-up of the Global Alliance of Leaders for Nuclear
Dr. Zerba, I'm really sorry for interrupting you, but my message to His Excellency Mr. El-Baradei, just for this time being, if we'll to finalize the intervention of Dr. Zerba, and after that we'll be back to you because of some problem in the connection, okay? Is it not a problem? Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Maybe so, yes. El-Baradei, you may continue. Mr.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks. I was saying what is more dangerous and disturbing is that this break in nuclear arms control negotiations and this atmosphere of distrust and attitude of going it alone is happening in almost all fields at a time when international cooperation and joint actions are needed the most. The climate crisis continues to overwhelm us. The pandemic continues to rage, ebbing and flowing in every part of the world. And yet, instead of human solidarity, we see unilateral approaches, blinkered nationalism, and blame games. In this environment, it is a real challenge to think of what the global alliance of leaders for nuclear security can do. And this is the question you have been asking, and I have been asking myself. I'm sure that our overarching reaction is that, quote, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. You know? But what is important is that we need to come up with concrete measures to stop and reverse this backsliding and put nuclear arms control and nuclear security back on the front burner of the global agenda. I can think of few ideas and measures that may be helpful. The first is the occasion of the upcoming NPT review conference, scheduled for January in New York. This would be the first opportunity for those 122 countries who concluded the ban treaty to speak in one voice and make clear-cut statement expressing their dismay, and nothing short of dismay, at the current state of affairs. More importantly, also to present a roadmap identifying what priority arms control measures the weapon state should urgently undertake. I think we are very clear, all of us, of what they need to do, which they haven't been doing any of. The second is the occasion of the first meeting of the state parties to the nuclear ban treaty, scheduled to take place in Vienna in March. It is essential that every effort be made prior to that meeting to get all the states who adopted the treaty to sign and ratify it. There are currently only 86 signatures and 56 ratifications. Well, clearly these numbers are simply not good enough. The third is to explore ways and means to re-engage DPRK in some form of dialogue. An isolated DPRK focused on testing new missiles and weapons is not in everyone's interest. The fourth is to launch a media campaign to engage public opinion, particularly the youth, to highlight the threats we face. I think the campaign about climate change could be a model for us, how young people, how the public in general has been engaged and putting pressure on government officials. I'm thinking of pages in major newspapers. Same we recently done with the vaccine inequality, which could be pro bono as part of these publications' corporate social responsibility. I'm also thinking as well of a creative and robust use of social media and engaging so-called influencers on major platforms. We all know how much important social media now has become in spreading the gospel, if you like. These are just few thoughts that came to my mind. I very much look forward to hearing your ideas. The key is to keep our eyes on the ball, so to speak, and not to surrender or succumb to this regrettable downward trajectory that might lead us, as we all know, to self-destruction intentionally or even worse, unintentionally. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And I'm totally agree with you that it's extremely important for this time being not to underestimate the challenges which we're facing the global nuclear order. And for me, it's very important that that we face a deteriorating nuclear security environment, and we have together to increase some global competition and the challenges in the international order for the proliferation and the proliferation of nuclear weapons. And in my understanding, that one of the main problems of the situation what we have for this time being, it is that we have something decades ago, the issues concerning of the nuclear disarmament, non-proliferation, or nuclear security. It was artificially withdrawn from the global agenda of the security issues, I mean, in all other dimensions. If we come back and put these particular issues to the incorporated nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation to this particular list, it will be a lot of possibilities to do step ahead, in my understanding, because it will be a good chance to find some loopholes, some path, how to do it maybe with the inclusions in other dimensions of security to incorporate it to one balanced matter. And just one question, Your Excellency, what's your personal opinion about the results of forthcoming review conference in New York, NPT review conference in New York? Are you optimistic or pessimistic?
Well, it's not going to be easy. It's really up to us, meaning the non-nuclear weapon states, how united we are, Ambassador Abositov, how we are committed to the cause of nuclear disarmament. I mean, the message has to be sent to the weapon states loud and clear, that you haven't been doing what you were supposed to do since 1970. For 50 years, we haven't seen any move on disarmament. And we continue to have this, as I said, double standard system, that you continue to rely on nuclear weapons, and you and your allies, and telling everybody else, don't touch nuclear weapons. That's not sustainable. That's not sustainable. I've been saying that for a long time. It's not sustainable, it's naive, and it's dangerous. Now you have a way out with the ban treaty. Engage with us. Engage with those 122 countries who are saying, let us talk. I mean, they're stretching their hand to the weapon state and telling them, you don't have to disarm tomorrow, but let us talk with each other. Let us have a program of how we see disarmament at the end of the tunnel. But to continue to meet every 5 years on the review conference and issue a statement basically saying, inshallah, tomorrow we are going to disarm, that's not an answer. That's not an answer. So we have to be very firm, but more important, very, very united.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And I'm totally agree with you, because for this time being, it's absolutely very important the organizations, non-governmental organizations, the discussions on this particular matter, I mean, that nuclear disarmament, non-proliferation, from people to people. And we have a lot of organizations on this particular direction. And for example, GAL, Global Alliance of Leaders, is one of the examples what we have to do in the future, because just imagine something like 20 or 30 years ago. It was not in the agenda of NGOs. It was a small portion of NGOs who are working on this particular direction. But now, because the people in the world, they know that they are living in one planet.
Correct.
And they would like to be safe from the discussions or contradictions between 2 or 3 countries. And this is the way maybe it will be absolutely very instrumental way how to gain our results. Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much.
I'm really sorry for interrupting Ambassador Lasina Zerbo, and I would like just to give you a floor for the second time and to continue your intervention. Thank you very much indeed.
No, thank you, Kerat. And I'd gone through already my word of thanks. And then I want to thank Director General El Baradei for his very insightful contribution to this panel. I want to start with the title you've put, 1 minute to midnight, time for action for the nuclear dialogue. I think it takes us back to October 1962. It was a sobering moment. the Cuban Missile Crisis, the world's only two superpower confrontation, or perception of confrontation, if you can put it this way, as well as the contemporary relevance that it was giving us. So 1 Minute to Midnight portrays the intense human drama of mankind on the brink of an unthinkable war. And at the time, and even still today, we talk about tension. One can put it as a hair-rising feeling from the miscalculations that nearly ended life on Earth. So we thought that this was gone, and then we'll never be in such a situation. But we're living in a world now where things are reminding us that we're getting closer and closer with the doomsday clock to midnight. So at this time of danger for the planet, or even for a certain nation, it is critical for political leaders first to think, then to think more, and try to avoid the unthinkable. We thought nothing more could come like that. We said again, from the Cuban Missile Crisis, we can give certain set as well, or milestone. But yet, the current tension, and yesterday we talked about Taiwan issue, the South Asia Sea, the China Sea, DPRK, JCPOA, and the lack of progress, as mentioned by Director General Baradai, on aspect of the NPT, which have led to the Ban Treaty being a force now for, I'm tempted to say, not only the developing world, the non-nuclear weapon states, to push for progress on this agenda of disarmament and non-proliferation. So as we get closer and closer to midnight, let's take it as this symbolic indicator of how close we are to a global catastrophe. So the acceleration of climate change, and somebody mentioned instead of climate change to talk about climate emergency, and the continuing reliance on nuclear weapons for security, including the modernization of existing weapons, are making us closer and closer to midnight. So now, how do we attain global support on these matters? And this is exactly what this issue of the Global Alliance of Leaders for Nuclear Security is all about. So we had numerous agreements regarding arms control and nuclear weapons, like the NPT, the START Treaty, the CTBT for that matter, since I've been involved in this issue for nearly 2 decades. For many years since the Cold War, US-Russia, we talk about now US-China, and US-Iran, and then as we foresee the rise of Africa, I'm sure one day we'll talk about either US-Africa or US or Europe-Africa, because some of the tension as well in that part of the world are to be considered to a certain, at a certain level. So the tension are deteriorating the confidence and trust from the superpowers to the rest of the world, with serious consequences on inclusiveness and the perception of globalization. And I wanted to get to the notion that Mark Husen is bringing in terms of globalization, is talk about connectivity. I think that's probably the notion that we should have. Connectivity will probably reflect more what we have to do if we want to be inclusive and get the whole world to be part of the global issues as we see them. So 2 countries come to mind when I refer to connectivity on this issue. It's Kazakhstan and Japan, for the moral authority that those 2 countries represent in nuclear non-proliferation and nuclear disarmament. Kazakhstan for having suffered nearly 500 nuclear test explosions, and Kazakhstan also for the leadership that your first president has shown in closing, coincidentally, 30 years of independence and 30 years of the closing of the Semipalatinsk nuclear test site. And Japan, to only country to have suffered the use of nuclear weapon. So those two countries have moral authority to lead this issue of nuclear disarmament and nuclear non-proliferation. I'm saying this beyond the treaty or the agreement that we tend, if I mention the CTBT, to get into force for the past 25 years, and then we're not there yet. And this is probably what leads to the issue of the BAM Treaty, which is an issue because we're not followed, in this issue of BAM Treaty by the nuclear weapon state. And that's something that needs to be discussed in the context of the Global Alliance, and then see how we can bridge that gap between those two entities. So clear leadership and the need of concrete action. But the concrete action is what Kazakhstan has shown and what you've done in terms of your leadership in this context. So, but your leadership wasn't only into the disarmament and non-proliferation, it was also on the economic transformation that you have shown and be a case study for many countries to see as a model. And that's something that I think you should communicate more about. So on climate change, that's one issue. I wanted to talk about climate change or climate emergency because as Director General El Baradei mentioned, maybe there is a need to dovetail those two aspects, the aspect of nuclear disarmament and the aspect of climate change together. When we bring this issue, if you bring them together, it makes life, one will help the other, because the climate issue has been a worldwide spoken issue, especially recently at Glasgow with the participation of young leaders and the next generation. I think if we bring those two aspects together, one way or another, in different fora, I think we may be getting progress on the disarmament issue together with how the climate change is perceived today by the rest of the world. But I want to say that if the doomsday clock could be seen as a scare tactic used to bring attention to important issue, because one can say, is global catastrophe really imminent? That's a question that when you refer to the doomsday clock, people might feel. But the key is the warning that it represents and the reminder that it brings to us constantly to say, we're not there yet, and then we must act. And unless we act, we're going head on, and then we'll face the catastrophe at some point. It could not be maybe as imminent, but it will come. So we need to take action between all of the signs that suggest that we are indeed heading in the wrong direction. And indeed, we're heading in the wrong direction. Today, there really isn't much in the way of cooperation in dialogue. I think there's a lot of talk, and then we don't see action coming, only from few, but not from the majority in this world, especially in the issue of nuclear weapon. And then the BAM Treaty certainly represents a reminder that there is pressure on those who are giving the perception of not progressing in the NPT or not progressing as the majority of the world would have felt, that there is a pressure coming from the non-nuclear weapon state. And then I'll come to my next point, which is nuclear power, and then as an energy source, which is something that is coming strongly and strongly, and then bringing nuclear security issues, especially in the developing world. I'm saying this because I'm taking up a responsibility as chairman of the Rwanda Atomic Energy Board, and then that's something that we're taking upon in the context of the African Development Bank and many African countries, and that will certainly be an issue. As we see, or we will see benefits in the use of nuclear energy, and then at the same time, the challenge that it represents in terms of the proliferation aspect of it. And that will lead us to tech issue, technological issue. What technology is bringing into making nuclear energy much safer and nuclear security much easier to deal with. I think I will stop there and then give time for others to act, and then probably take questions when they come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zerba, for your very substantial intervention, and in my understanding that you know CTBTO from inside, and maybe so just when you leave your office, and for example now, maybe new idea are coming to you how to improve the work of CTBTO now, or maybe some new ideas, or maybe some new impetus how to do it.
If you want me to talk about new idea, I would refer to my successor, but I can talk to what we've done.
It's your personal idea.
Yeah,
it's your personal thing.
No, my personal idea in terms of new way of moving, I think the establishment of the CTBTO youth group and the way the next generation has taken this issue is something that needs to be followed, and an example to follow, not only in the context of the CTBT, but in the context of non-proliferation and disarmament as a whole. And it was mentioned already, the BAM Treaty is picking up the pace in that context, because the next generation and then the young people will not follow the constraints that are given to head of international organization from the countries that are represented, because they speak freely, and then they bring ideas that probably break the barriers that are put by the multilateral environment. And then they give us a window to come in and then to say what we wouldn't have said in the context of a meeting of state parties, but giving us an opportunity to push the barriers and push the envelope in a way where we can pass certain messages, especially to countries that are not moving forward and in the right direction with regard to aspect of the treaty. And for the CTBT, this is an organization that the international community should be proud of, because it's an organization that has achieved what it was meant to in terms of technological development and relevance to verifying the treaty. And the verification is a reality today, and that's something that we all proud of, and then we have to use as a backbone to try and see if that could be enough to convince the 8 remaining states to ratify and then get the treaty into force. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Your Excellency, just we have to mention, as a matter of fact, for this time being, that just only one country in the world, Kazakhstan, I mean, it was a decision of the first president of Kazakhstan, leader of the nation, and closing nuclear test site. You know that rather different, they're on silent regime. They're not closed. Just only one nuclear test site was closed in the world, and this is a matter of fact. Now, so I would like to present the floor to Angela Kane and Sam Nunn, Distinguished Fellow, Nuclear Threat Initiative, UN High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, and Under-Secretary General in the United Nations. And yes, cooperative threat reduction is a absolutely very important program for Kazakhstan too, as you know. And Sam Nunn and Richard Lugler, it was absolutely great contribution that we have a very good process of denuclearization of Kazakhstan. And during this period of time, I worked as a director of the International Security and Arms Control, and I work parallelly from day to day, in day-to-day manner on this particular project. Please, Madam, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kairat, and thank you for having me here, and I will certainly convey your kind words also to Senator Nunn and Ernie Moniz, the Secretary of Energy, former Secretary of Energy. I wanted to come back to the CTBTO just for a minute, if I may, and I wanted to acknowledge that Kazakhstan invited, in fact, the group of eminent persons and the youth group, and particularly the youth group, 3 years ago to Kazakhstan and then to Semipalatinsk, and I saw for several days the energy that comes from the youth group. I thought it was absolutely exhausting to basically follow them, but it was a very instructive visit, and actually it has yielded also very good benefits in terms of the engagement of not only the group of eminent persons, but particularly of the youth group in particular. So I wanted to thank you for that very much. Now, to my mind, it also talks about the scare tactic that, again, Lassina mentioned, and I think this is something that has been very unfortunate for the nuclear issue, because there's always been like nuclear winter, you know, 1 minute to midnight, so there's always something that's very negative that is associated with this, which is correct. But on the other hand, sometimes I think it turns people off. They don't want to talk about this because it's something that's negative. Who wants to talk about negative? Now, I've worked over 35 years at the United Nations, and I think I'm the eternal optimist. You cannot work for the United Nations until you believe in the better part of the world. And this is why, and that's why I'm coming to it, I particularly like the second part of the title that you've given it, and that's time for action. And that's really what we want to talk about, it's time for action. Because what we have seen is that the arms control architecture has totally crumbled due to inattention, due to lack of engagement, due to a lack of political will, and also the absence of negotiation. And it is good to remind ourselves that military budgets over the last couple of years have kept increasing. They have reached staggering heights. They're now over 1.8 trillion US dollars last year, and they have been growing 4%, nearly 4% every year in real terms. China's defense budget grew by over 5% in 2020 to over $12 billion. And there are 5 countries, the US, China, India, Russia, and Saudi Arabia, that account for 63% of global military spending in 2019. It is a staggering figure. And President Biden won a reprieve of 5 years with the extension of New START. That was very good, but the question is, what comes next? What are the next steps? I do welcome the strategic stability talks between the US and Russia that started in July, but the purpose, and I think it's worth quoting that, the purpose is to seek to lay the groundwork for future arms control and risk reduction measures. Now, there's a recent decision to create 2 working groups, but on the other hand, to have this goal does not make me very hopeful that actual negotiations will start soon. And both countries, in fact, have held back on expected outcomes. They have not been very crisp about what is going to come of it, i.e. negotiations of a new treaty. And the issue is further complicated, let us remind ourselves of that, by the ongoing US nuclear posture review. We don't know exactly what's coming out of it. Now, I have a suggestion that some may say it's very simplistic, but rather than weighing down the discussion with long-range, conventional, or dual-capable positions, such as hypersonic weapons and technical nuclear weapons, why not discuss a straightforward reduction in the numbers of nuclear weapons that are matched one by one? That would give a very strong signal to the non-nuclear weapon states that actual disarmament has taken place, rather than an open-ended dialogue which could go on for years. And here we need to keep in mind the US electoral calendar as well, because President Biden was elected 1 year ago, has 3 more years to go, and that is a short time in the negotiation calendar, particularly given the fact that the arms control negotiation muscle, which I think was the word that Rose Guttemüller used, have atrophied in both countries, in both the US and Russia, as New START was the last treaty to be negotiated, and that was over 10 years ago. Now, the NPT review conference will take place in 6 weeks. And after several postponements, the RevCon is somewhat anticlimactic to now, at least to me. Everyone has been focused on the timing on the conference. When will it happen? Will it have to be virtual? Can it be in person? Can civil society attend? It seems that the substance of the discussion has receded in the background. And how many working papers have been submitted? What proposals do they contain? I had a look at the official website, and I had a look at the papers that were submitted. And so far, it's been 8 working papers. I think this is meager pickings for a conference that has been years under preparation. There are already consultations on the outcome document of the NPT review conference. And this is it. Hopes are expressed that it will be adopted by consensus. But my question is, will that be a positive outcome? Is that the only outcome we expect? The document by consensus, which possibly could also be at the lowest common denominator of the language. But will consensus language not paper over the deep divisions that exist between the 5 nuclear states and the majority of non-nuclear weapons possessors who are fighting for meaningful disarmament measures under Article 6 of the NPT? I have to really think about Greta Thunberg's comment on COP26 last week, and she characterized the discussion, said blah, blah, blah. And why wonder, after the NPT deliberations, what will be the outcome? How will it be characterized afterwards? The NPT, in my opinion, is really symptomatic of the stasis in the nuclear file. Nuclear weapons have been with us for 3/4 of a century, and the mantra that they've kept us safe has waned, Deterrence seems an outdated concept, and it applies only to a select few. What is really important at this stage is to move away from the debate on numbers of nuclear weapons. So one wonders how many weapons are really needed to devastate the globe. The lens has to be widened to include other priority issues. It's just been mentioned already, the climate change. What about climate change? What are the effects on the environment? The legacy of nuclear testing has been mentioned. What about nuclear power plants to generate electricity? We have not forgotten Chernobyl nor Fukushima. Yes, it's very important to discuss nuclear doctrine, to discuss strategic stability, to discuss non-strategic nuclear weapons, missile defense, long-range conventional strike systems, etc., etc., and also to discuss developments in space and other domains. But the strategy is to engage not only the US and Russia, but also to bring China to the table. And I'm hopeful by the lengthy conversation that was held between President Biden and Chairman Xi yesterday. And again, they agreed to hold strategic stability talks. But again, and here I quote, because sometimes the language has to be looked at very carefully, because it said they would look to begin to carry forward discussion. They would look to begin to carry forward discussion. But again, we should not underestimate, it is a first step that is extremely important. And on the other hand, I think it would be very good if these looking forward would actually start very, very soon. Now, there is this oft-repeated mantra that the NPT is the cornerstone of non-proliferation, and we know it's been with us for 51 years, and it cannot continue on what I would say on autopilot. It needs the recognition that the world has changed, that it's shaped by a growing multipolarity that has resulted in increasing systemic competition between great powers. Now, you, Mr. Chairman,